All righty. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on the program, our first since our summer vacation break, we welcome back to the show Canadian journalist Arnold August, who is also a lecturer. He is a leading expert on Cuba and a strong Cuba solidarity activist. He is the author of Democracy in Cuba and the 1997-98 elections, Cuba and its neighbors, Democracy in Motion, and Cuba-US relations, Obama and beyond. He has had articles published in the Canada Files, Orinoco Tribune, CGTN, Friends of Socialist China, Venezuela Analysis, Black Agenda Report, Globalresearch.ca, and he is invited regularly on programs as diverse as RT, Sputnik, Global Research, News Hour, Press TV, Telesur, and of course, he's also a member of the editorial board of the International Manifesto Group. And yes, he's back on the program in our All Things Latin America edition, where we're going to be talking about Venezuela today. So first off, Arnold, thank you. Thank you so much for coming back on the program, and our first
It's
program since our summer break.
Man, I'm really surprised you actually took a summer break, Yuri.
Yes,
You're
can you believe
always
that?
working. Well, if you say so, otherwise I wouldn't believe it. But in any case, it's a worthwhile break. I'm sure you deserve it.
Thank you very much for that. And I'll talk to the audience a little bit afterwards about like what I've been up to. But did get the chance to do some good Palestine solidarity work, and it was part of a big march with the Black Liberation Alliance against the far right, the rise of transphobia, xenophobia, and so forth like that, and very strong Palestine solidarity. But that we're going to have to. But that we're going to have to save.
Was that in England? Was that in English?
Yes. I was in London from July the 24th.
Great, yeah.
So, and of course, you know that July the 26th is a very special day for Cuban revolutionaries, and that actually happens to be my birthday. On top of that, July the 26th.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very important. It's a very important data for at least two reasons.
Exactly. So, Arnold, let's get underway. And actually, just before I get to my first question with Arnold, very special announcements, folks. You can now donate to One Plus One. One Plus One has a PayPal page where people can donate however little or however much as they want. And if you go to my YouTube channel, the link is right there. But I'll always make sure to post it in the pinned comment sections where I post the links to for people to further educate themselves. But yes, One Plus One now has a PayPal page that people can now donate. So please donate generously if you can, and it would be greatly appreciated. All right, so Arnold, first question I wanted to ask you is now, so Venezuela has been in the news, and from all accounts, I've been watching, Breakthrough News. I've been watching Orinoco Tribune. I've been trying to catch up on all of the news I've been missing, from Impress News to so forth. It seemed as if it was compared to other Venezuelan elections, there wasn't so much right-wing violence or anything like that. It was mostly fairly peaceful. Lots of people came as observers. You were an observer. Bianca Mugeni, formerly of the CFPI, was an observer, and I know many other people who were also observers and so forth, and they mostly said it was pretty peaceful. Maduro has won another, I would say, another big landslide election, and of course, the opposition is calling fraud, and the U.S. is recognizing whoever they want to be the leader of Venezuela. So, but before we get into all of that, talk to us about your time as an election observer in Venezuela the week of July 28th. What was your responsibility? And then my second follow-up question to that is, in this recent article of yours at Orinoco Tribune, You explained how the voting system works, so feel free to explain to our audience whatever you want to explain about the voting system in Venezuela and why the accusations of voter fraud that's being made by Maduro are a pack of lies by those who don't really want democracy to flourish in Venezuela.
Firstly, you mentioned looking at Venezuela from where you're at now or from elsewhere in the world. It seems, the whole process seems to have been very peaceful. I think one of my most important experiences in Caracas, by the way, was my fifth time in Venezuela, fifth visit. And every time I go there, I learn something more. And this time I learned something more about the actual electoral process, something I've been interested in for over a decade, 10, 15 years. Now, the experience, of course, in the electoral process, in the voting booths and all that is very important. But so I don't forget, I like to highlight that one of the main features, one of the main uh, experiences that I had there in Caracas was actually in front of the television. Something that the Venezuelan television that we do not see outside of Venezuela, that is local television programs, in which Maduro appears and explains things. That was very, very instructive. And we could deal with that a bit later, the so-called, it really wasn't peaceful at all, because the day after, there was very important, provocative, violent actions that took place as a result of the election result, but we could deal with that later. But just so I don't forget to explain what I saw but on television in Spanish, while I was there, being fluent in Spanish, of course, helps when a lot in order to provide a good assessment of what is happening there, what happened there, and what's still going on there. Now, as far as the electoral process is concerned, you know, it's it's fraud free, and it was made to be fraud free for either the opposition or for the the Chavistas. That is the goal of it. Now, the first thing, in order to vote in Venezuela, one has to be registered to vote. That is, a citizen with an address and all that, registered to vote, and they do so. Now, on voting day, in this case, it was July 28th, 2024. People show up. We saw that they show up at the voting booth. The first thing they have to do is exercise a thumbprint on a machine. It's a biometric machine, automatic. Why? This is a proof that firstly the person has registered, because you have to vote, you have to be registered. Secondly, it also prevents people trying to vote twice. So that's the first step. Then the person moves on to another booth in the overall voting room, which is quite large, with about 4 or 5 different booths. Now, in that voting booth, that was really an eye opener. A very modern way to vote. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's quite ironic that the opponents in the United States are crying fraud, but there's no other voting mechanical system in the world that is so safe and so secure. So people go over to a modern touchscreen, and there you have the list of all the candidates, the right-wing opposition, the middle or whatever, and the Maduro slate, and then they just touch the candidate for which they vote. Now, people may say, well, does this vote sort of disappear in the cyberspace? No. Right after making their choice by a touchscreen, that same machine prints out a tally, the actual ballot, to show who the person voted for. Now, the person who's voting, they have a right to say, well, that's not who I voted for. It was wrong. Then it pops up again, and they make the choice again. Or if the person said, wait a second, I made a mistake, I was confused, I voted for the wrong one, which can happen, of course, and the ballot comes up again, and the person has another choice to vote. And once that is done, that is their final choice. Now, the person takes that paper trail, and goes to another booth where, once again, with their thumbprint, they prove that they have been registered, they've gone through the first step, and then they are registered as someone who could vote right there with witnesses from the Electoral Commission. The person then takes that same ballot and puts it in the ballot box. And that is pretty much the end of that process. Now, of course, what the big thing is now is that, first of all, I think it's important to take into account that while this is based on internet and all that, but during the process of voting from very early in the morning on voting day till the end of the day, that voting machine is not connected to internet. Why? This prevents any attempt at hacking or interference with the process. So after the voting takes place, the evening of the voting, the count takes place in the different polling booths. Now, it's important to take into account and that every political party, right, left, and center, every political party has a right to send a witness to witness the vote counting in each precinct, if you like, or in each poll. Now, once this is done, once the voting takes place there, that is the mechanical voting as well as the paper tallies, the representatives of each party have a right to say, wait a second, there's a problem here. This is, there's a discrepancy. They have to make a formal complaint, and it has to be dealt with. Or if everyone agrees, they just sign off. Signing off means that, okay, we saw it, everything's fine. Now, so that's how it took place. But right after that, how come, it's such a fault-free or fraud-free system? On what basis does the United States and their allies, let's be frank about it, are crying fraud with regards to the elections? Well, in my view it's nothing new. I mean, right from the beginning, like 4 months before that elections, the right wing was already saying, well, we can't really rely on the electoral system in Venezuela. It's bound to be fraud. And of course, the day before, they keep on repeating their fraud. And, like what they did was really amazing. I mean, we should not be amazed, Yuri, because we know both of you and I and all our colleagues, we have no illusions at all about U.S. imperialism, right? But, this is what takes the cake. They actually set up a parallel, like the only sovereign body in Venezuela to decide upon elections is the National Electoral Commission, established by the Venezuelan Constitution. And they have 30 days in which to provide the results publicly, which they did. I mean, the very same night of the voting, they presented the first count. Okay. Now, what happened then? Now, right after that, rather than, first of all, the opposition, they never recognized the voting procedure. They never signed anything to say, okay, there was a suggestion made by the government. All the parties participating should sign an agreement that we will recognize the election results. Why? Because it's the interest of the Venezuelan people, whether it's right, left, or center, not to have any violence or chaos.
So in other words, so kind of like so kind of like when every, like in the United States right now, everybody's on the edge of their seats because they're afraid that if Donald Trump doesn't win, he won't he'll continue to be a sore loser, not recognize the elections, and then his supporters will literally storm the barricades again.
Yeah.
And there was also people who were afraid in Brazil of Bolsonaro doing the same thing. Of course, Bolsonaro, his own supporters, actually stormed, the Supreme Court and so forth. So basically, so what you're trying to say is that actually the Venezuelan government and all of the opposition, left-wing opposition, center-right, far-right opposition, none of them made a vow that, that when this election takes place, whoever wins, we simply will respect the results, and we move on, and we move on in advance. Or
well, that's not quite true, because there were the more moderate elements of the opposition. They did sign an agreement. First, they signed that they will, they agree with the basic sovereign authority for deciding the election outcome is the CNE, the Commission of the National Elections. Okay, that's based on the Constitution. There was another attempt to people sign off that we will agree with the result of the elections. But the moderate opposition, they did sign. The only ones who did not sign were the extreme right wing, backed by the United States. They refused to sign that, to not commit themselves. What? Of course, they had a plan. Now, what is really amazing, I mean, we should really be amazed because U.S. imperialism, there's no way anyone could, we never have any illusions, right? But this one even shocked me. They went as far as to establish their own electoral system to replace the sovereign national. Now, Yuri, where was that electoral system established? Was it in Caracas or another? No, it was in Miami. Believe it or not, the day before the elections, they established a new domain name that was supposed to provide the real results of the elections based in Miami. And based on that, they presented all kinds of false notions that they have. Firstly, they said they had 30% of the precincts or the voting booth counted. They said, no, we have 70%. No, we have 80%. So they're even, they contradict themselves as to how many voting centers they have, even with their false, electoral domain based in Miami, And so, and also they also claimed at one point, believe it or not, that their finding in Miami shows that their opposition, the extreme right-wing opposition, won in every state. Every area, every major city, every state in Venezuela, it's mathematically impossible. And also, people who have seen the massive demonstration that took place in Venezuela, and all, like Maduro, he's 61 years old, but he has so much energy. I followed him very closely while I was there on local television. I think he must have been to every day about 3 different airports because Venezuela is a big country. It's not like Cuba. It's not like Nicaragua. It's not like Bolivia. It's a huge country.
Yeah.
So he traveled around every day, directly meeting with the people, massive demonstrations. Okay. And the very day, what they call a very historic thing for Venezuelan political system is what they call the closing campaign rally, which took place in Caracas on the evening of 3 days before, because in Venezuela it is illegal to hold rallies, election rallies, 3 days before, 3 days prior to voting. You have to end it 3 days prior to voting day for obvious reasons. They want people to settle down, think about things, and not to be pressured. Now, I was at that rally, the closing rally. I mean, it's an iconic activity, event in the Venezuelan political process. I think we all remember that very famous, iconic photo of Hugo Chavez standing in the rain, in front of, maybe 500,000 people in Caracas. That was not too long before he passed away, and that iconic photo showed him, in a raincoat and, speaking in the pouring rain to, literally 500,000 people just in one square. And so that's what it represents for the Venezuelan people. There was Maduro on July 25th, I believe, 3 days before the end of the campaign, doing the same thing. Now, it was packed. I mean, there's, I don't know, 500,000 people. There's so many people there that after having had these local rallies all over the country. So how is it possible? You don't have to be, a genius to figure away. It's not possible after all those things took place that the opposition want, not in 1 or 2 states. It might have been more probable. They say they want in every state. Impossible, But the point is, they can say these things because the media, the corporate media, is dedicated, so dedicated, such a slavish manner in presenting a false notion. Now, for example, the last few days, first of all, we talk about, they've been saying the last few days, there's a peaceful demonstrations that took place in Venezuela on the evening of the July 28th, or the next day, July 29th. Wait a second. I was watching, I was sitting in my room. I was about to go to sleep, hotel room in Caracas, late in the evening. And one of my colleagues, other journalists, said, wait, watch this on TV. Maduro is speaking on something important. I turned on the TV, just in time to see Maduro going in detail. I mean, I could actually send out this video, even though it's in Spanish, but the visuals are so impacting that he showed with about he explained things. Then he has 20, 30 different videos that he showed where these right-wing extremists, what they call, and he's saying they're mainly people who are drugged, that they, after they were captured, they admitted they were paid $150 to do. They actually were on a major rampage and burning hospital clinics, the offices of the PSUV, and other public buildings. They destroyed uh, uh, 5 different statues of Chavez. Okay, there. So it just goes to show you, that's okay for him. That's not violent. But of course, in Belgium, you could have 13 statues of King Leopold in Belgium, who's responsible for the genocide of at least 10 million people in Congo, but it's okay to have 13 statues of him there. But these right wingers are so sick fanatical, they tore down the statues of Chavez. They also tore down a statue of one of the most important indigenous leaders of Venezuela, which predates Chavez by many centuries. So you have these videos very clear. They're all a lot of arsenic attacks, violent attacks, and all. But this, of course, is not shown by the corporate media. So they could tell, oh, there were peaceful protests. There's the only peaceful protest that has taken place in the last few days in Venezuela was the peaceful protest. For example, yesterday, I think I sent it out to all of my Facebook friends, a massive demonstration in Caracas yesterday, Saturday, protesting against the lies and regarding fraud and the elections, and in support of the elected president Maduro. That was a peaceful protest. No one was injured. Everyone was happy singing. But do not say we cannot accept for 1 second that these peaceful protests are anything of the sort. They do not show what they did on TV.
Exactly. And that's a perfect segue to this question, which is, who is the current leader of the Venezuelan far-right opposition, backed, and I emphasize, backed by the US, the UK, EU, France, Germany, Australia, and New Zealand? I believe Marina Mochada is her name. And, well, uh, well, well, yes. Go on, explain. And I do have an interesting follow-up question to ask about.
Well, Machado, okay, of course, it's important. She is the leading figure. Now they're going crazy. They're trying to present her as the most important female leader in the world today, against dictatorship and all that. But, they forget to mention a small little point that she actually formally went to a foreign country where a meeting was taking place of Latin American countries, that she spoke, because she does, of course, cannot represent Venezuela in that venue. She spoke in the name of another country, I believe it was Panama, and speaking for Venezuela in the Panamanian seat in that international uh, gathering. She actually called for military intervention by the OAS, by the United States in Venezuela. So, of course, this is one of the reasons for her to be disqualified to take part in election, which is normal. I mean, you can only criticize the Maduro government. Why the hell they don't put her in jail? There, the proof is right there. She's saying we want military intervention. On many occasions, she, as well as her previous other leaders, have called for more sanctions in order to cripple the Maduro government, to force the people to rise up of the Maduro government, like the United States has done in Cuba. Squeeze it as much as possible, and people say, "Oh, the problems with the government. Let's overthrow the government." So this is how far they go. Now, I think that I don't know how anyone could avoid the fact there is a written. I saw the letter just 2, 3 days ago in Spanish. She actually wrote a letter to a man called Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel. Now she wrote this a couple of years ago.
In fact, that's exactly what my follow-up question is, which is, what is the Israeli connection to her? So go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess we're on the same page on that, right? And so she actually wrote a letter. It's written black and white. We didn't make it up, right? And she says, Mr. Biden, of course, he has to write it she cannot write it to the Israeli embassy in Venezuela because thanks to Hugo Chavez, there is no Israeli embassy in Venezuela. Very important point. That's one of the reasons they want to throw the Maduro government, but we can get back to that later. So in that letter to Medvedev, well, thank you very much for your help and your support. And if we are elected, we are going to move the recognize Israel, of course, and not only that, we will move the embassy, the Venezuelan embassy, which is not there, move it to Tel Aviv. So this very close ties between the right-wing opposition and the Israeli government, and who knows just to what extent the Israeli government or the Mossad are actually involved in this latest attempt to overthrow the Maduro government. Of course, we know that Mali in Argentina is also very close to Israel. So that whole plot of the extreme right wing from Argentina, Machado in Venezuela, it's a very closely knit group, and they are the ones, and I think we have to discuss it. Like they are actually trying for a military coup, some kind of a coup to overthrow the Maduro government, and that's why they have, without any shame, they refuse to say that the peaceful protesters in Venezuela were actually arsonists attempting killing people and all that, while they completely ignore. We never see not even 1 second of footage of the massive demonstrations that took place, for example, yesterday, Saturday, in support of Maduro. So it's a very dangerous situation. Of course, when we talk about dangerous situation, we also have to take into account Israel, because they also can be very much involved in this whole thing. We have to keep in mind, we touch on this lightly, and you and I have talked about it before, that they want, they want to overthrow the Maduro government for many reasons. It's true that the Venezuela has the largest source of oil in the world. That is one reason. Of course, you also have Elon Musk, who's very much active to overthrow Maduro because of the lithium. But I think that one has to also take into account the ideological and political considerations. That is the importance of Chavismo, of the Maduro government following in those footsteps in opposing U.S. imperialism, and also very strongly opposing Zionism. And the United States cannot afford, does not want to accommodate themselves with a Latin America, which you have that huge country, Venezuela, even if it's supported by only say 50 or 60% of the population, whatever, have that very clear ideological position against US imperialism, against Zionism, and building a new society, what they call 21st century socialism, which it is. It's not social democracy, as some people like to say, Like I remember this is a joke, when last time
because some of Chavez and Maduro and other socialists who are part of the pink tide, some of their left critics, those of us, those of our Marxist friends, our Marxist-Leninist friends, will sometimes say that they're too social democratic. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but this is a joke, but I have to share that with you. A few years ago, there's a presentation or a delegation from the Democratic Socialists of America, like the left wing of the Democratic Party. They went to Venezuela. They met with Maduro, very good, very nice. But I don't know if the person was the official spokesperson, but the person came back from Venezuela saying, yeah, I saw what it's like in Venezuela. It's very good. It's sort of what Bernie Sanders would be, what it would be like in the United States if Bernie Sanders came to power in the United States. That's ridiculous, That Bernie Sanders is social democracy. But in Venezuela, it is not. It's revolutionary socialism. I've seen it through my own eyes. Like they're supposed to have been, it's claimed that Venezuela is a failing state. It's not the case. In the streets of Venezuela and Caracas that I saw, the shelves of grocery stores, pharmacy, and other outlets are full. There's lots of everything is available. And if it was not a revolutionary socialist government, how could they possibly have brought down inflation from more than 1,000% a few years ago to 1%, 1% in June? Inflation rate, very, very good. As well, they have managed to develop production of food so that basically 97% of the food intake of the Venezuelan people is grown in Venezuela. And how many millions of homes has the Venezuelan government built as a result of the revenues that they get from the control over their oil? Free homes to the Venezuelan people. Where else in the world do you have that happening? That people are, hey, here's a key to your house, here's your free home. And this is despite all the sanctions, despite all the sanctions that have been going on for so many years, they have managed to do that. So it's only a government that has a revolutionary socialist outlook, that is really left wing, and that is completely anti-imperialist, at the same time able to make concessions with the domestic situation. For example, they have a very important program of promoting small enterprises in Venezuela, which is very good, because the issue, the model of a 100% state-controlled economy, that doesn't work. But China is developing so much. One of the reasons is that they're able to balance state socialism at the same time with Marxism, with the market, but all within the context of the well-being of the Chinese people. So, this thing about, just, oh, well, he's just Maduro and Chavez before, they're just social. No, it's not. They're revolutionary social. You just have to be in Caracas to listen to Maduro speak, and you speak to someone who's a revolutionary. One thing that really impressed me, I wrote that in my Facebook page, that there was one speech in which I attended. I was right there in the front row. I was really happy and honored. And Maduro sat there calmly and gave a history of Venezuela right from the beginning. The struggle of the Aboriginal, of the First Nations in Venezuela against the Spanish colonialists. Then the struggle of the peasants against Spain, and then of the working class against U.S. imperialism in the 1980s, 1990s. So, right up to date, everything without a note. He didn't have one written note, and he knows Venezuela inside out. So I just said, partly as a joke, but I meant it, that he gave a history lesson on Venezuela that is far more profound, far more scientific, Marxist scientifically, than all of the so-called academic experts on Venezuela combined in the United States, Canada, and UK. And that by the way, he's a former bus driver, right? But revolutionary consciousness.
But then,
sorry, I went up for a long time, but this is really
no. It's no. That's perfect. Don't apologize for that. But a follow-up question I have to ask then is, the world. Yes, actually, two follow-up questions. The first one I have to ask is, is sort of going back on this Israel connection. So there have been global protests. There have been global protests against what Israel is doing in Gaza and in all of historic Palestine, and of course, many people are afraid that there's going to be a wider regional war since Israel has been assassinating Iranian leaders, has been attacking Lebanon, and Hezbollah is ready to defend Lebanese sovereignty and all that stuff. Now, in Latin America, has responded to the protests and to the anti-Zionist electorates that they do have by breaking off relations with Israel. I think they should go further in their BDS, but at least some have broken off arms trading, security trading, and stuff like that with Israel. Venezuela has been one of the countries. Bolivia, which also almost avoided a coup, has been another one of the countries, and Brazil under Lula. Now, it's interesting what you were saying about how the far right in Israel and Latin America, backed by the U.S., are all coalescing together. Mele, of course, got a lot of backing by Israel, the Israel lobby and the Christian lobby. Bolsonaro tapped into
Right.
to the Christian Zionist movement in Brazil, and they were very big, in getting him into power. Now, so I'm just curious. Now Venezuela, since Hugo Chavez was in power, he was always very outspoken against what Israel was doing to the Palestinians, and Maduro also the same thing. Now the right wing, the far right opposition in Venezuela is very big, very well funded. But is there a similar Christian Zionist movement or Jewish Zionist movement in Venezuela that wants better relations with Israel and is fine to elect reactionary folks in the name of having that happening? I'm curious.
Well, frankly, I personally do not. I'm not aware of if there's any such section of the society in Venezuela. I don't think so because I've read on various occasions how the Venezuelan government has had very close ties and has very close ties with the Jewish community in Venezuela, which exists and all that. But I don't think there's any movement similar in Venezuela as we saw in Brazil. The only ones are, of course, sorry, Machado, okay, the opposition, right-wing opposition leader. But when she goes to rallies, she doesn't say, I support Israel, I support Israel. She writes these notes off, these very, clever notes, secret notes off to Netanyahu. Thank you for your support. When we get elected, we will do such and such. But they're not made public, It's kept away from the people. For example, I like to give an example from Canada. I think we fall Evan Dwyer of CBC. He's an openly right-wing person. I've seen you and I have been dealing with him on social media. A very right-wing person, except on the issue of Israel. He opposes Israel with regards to Palestine. But that same person who opposes Israel with regards to Palestine is now very much actively in support of the right-wing coup shadow that's taking place of Maduro. But in his social media, he said, yes, of course I support her, even though I disagree with that they're pro-Israel. That's how opportunist he is. But it also goes to show the important role that the Zionism versus Palestine plays in the international arena and in each country. But you mentioned the role of Chavez and Palestine. It's more than just supporting Palestine. As a result of Chavez, he has established the position of Venezuela in support of Palestinian liberation as a national priority, irrespective of who's in power. It's a national priority. That is why they are not too ashamed. In fact, very, very proud to go to meetings in Venezuela, even before it became fashion to wear the Palestinian headscarf and all that. So it's a national policy, and Maduro, like that, never backs away. Doesn't give in 1 centimeter to the pressure. Doesn't matter if there's a coup attempt against him, in which we know Israel would very like to participate in order to overthrow him. Despite that, he doesn't give in 1 inch to the pressure with regards to Palestine. And I'm concerned, I'm convinced, just to mention, I don't want to repeat, that is one of the reasons that U.S. imperialism wants to overthrow Maduro. In addition to all the social policies, anti-imperialism, the control over the oil and all, is also because of its stand on Israel. The world has changed so much since October 7th that no one could avoid. Where do you stand in Palestine? And that is why one of the reasons they want to overthrow Maduro, and I think they are ready to take any steps necessary to try and do it.
In fact, it's important to know. It's important. It's also important to know this, that Israel historically, the injustice, that the crimes against humanity that the Israeli settler colonial state inflicts on the Palestinians, as well as Lebanese, as well as Iranians and so forth. Israel doesn't just do evil in West Asia. Israel was a partner in crime to the Anglo-American Canadian Empire when it comes to Latin America. They were on the side of America in the Cold War, supporting all of the right-wing juntas and death squads and military right-wing dictatorships in Latin America, from Argentina to Brazil to El Salvador to Nicaragua and so forth like that. Israel also supported Mobutu up until he became expendable, and then supported Laurent Kabila and the war criminal at large, the ethno-nationalist Paul Kagame. Israel helped overthrow Milton Obote and propped up Idi Amin. And when Idi Amin became expendable, later supported Yoweri Museveni and so forth. And Israel also supported apartheid South Africa, tried to help apartheid South Africa get nuclear weapons and so forth. So Israel doesn't just yes, and of course, Israel supported the military coup in Egypt that got General Sisi into power. Israel also supported the ISIS death squads that overthrew Gaddafi, supported the Netanyahu, supported the criminal war against Iraq the second time around, lobbied for that, even while millions of Israelis were protesting against it. So it's important to know that the injustices that Israel inflicts on Palestine, inflicts on Lebanon, its warmongering against Iran. Israel is a partner in crime to the Anglo-American, Canadian, or as I like to call them, the Pan-European empires.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I would not be surprised if indeed Mossad and Israel was trying to help overthrow Maduro. Now a follow-up question is this is actually my last question, but a follow-up question to what you were saying. You're very much afraid that a much more violent military coup could try to be underway in Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 7 being you don't have to be too afraid of a coup because people power movements will prevail in Venezuela, or 8 to 10 meaning we should be very afraid that the U.S., Canada, EU, Israel, Australia, New Zealand will overthrow Maduro in the hopes that it might help the Democrats win an election because of the far-right liberal diaspora folks that come from Venezuela and Cuba and so forth. Where on the scale should we be afraid? Should it be 8 to should it be 1 should it be 1 to 7 or 8 to 10? How afraid should we be afraid of a coup going on?
To be on the safe side, in the sense that we should really be aware, conscious of the possibilities, I would put it on the 7 to 10. In the sense that we have no illusions. Everyone knows U.S. is weak. They're losing in the Middle East. Their war against Russia is a disaster. Russia is able to withstand it. And with regards to Western Asia, which is very important, China is increasingly taking an important position on the international scale through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, through BRICS, in which more and more countries are joining. So that does not mean that they are weakened, but they're going to lash out. They are lashing out in desperation in order to try to keep their position of hegemony over the world. And Venezuela is one of those hotspots. I think that one has to be very aware, very conscious that what is the scenario? They already established the de facto real government in Miami. Machado hasn't gone there yet, but their electoral system is based on Miami. Organized by U.S. Company that did their website. They got their domain name just 24 hours before the elections, based in the United States. So you have the de facto, alternate government in Miami, ready to do something, just as they had Guaido for many years as a de facto opposition, who he himself called for military intervention, of course, which the Americans did not follow. He called for more sanctions, but it's based in Miami. And of course, when you say Miami, you also say Zionism. You know, Zionism is very strong in Miami. They have the technical know-how. They can also try to influence the situation there in order to develop their, the alternative government there. But yeah, there is a definite possibility of military intervention. But of course, for electoral purposes, Biden, before his term ends or his life ends, if he doesn't pass away before that, might not want to have an intervention, military intervention at this time in that country, even though, of course, it will not affect his standing within the Democratic Party, because AOC, supposedly some kind of a left wing person in the Democratic Party, she fully supports the right wing Machado government. So so that's not the issue. But still, does Biden really want to have another military conflict on his hand in addition to Israel? And what if Trump wins after? I'm not too sure that Trump himself, being some kind of an isolationist, might want to have some kind of a military intervention with regards to Venezuela. So at the same time, we can have no illusions. But on the other hand, what is really important is Venezuela is strong, irrespective of what they say. They hide the fact that there are millions demonstrating peacefully in support of Maduro as we speak now, as yesterday. You have a civic military union. The army is very, very strong and solid in Venezuela. There are also a lot of militia people. This trip and my previous trip to Caracas, I interviewed on the street people who are wearing the militia uniform. I interviewed them, and they are decided. These are civilians, but with arms. And then you have, they say that Maduro won by a very narrow margin, whatever, 51%. But I say there are 5 or 6 million Chavistas with that revolutionary scientific consciousness, patriotic consciousness. Do we think that for 1 second these 5 million people and more, the army, the civic military union, the militia, and that they will allow themselves to be intimidated by the United States? I mean, I don't want to be, sound any alarm. But if the United States tries anything, it might be another Vietnam for them. I remember when I was in Venezuela about 6, 7 years ago. It was at the time when Guaido was being promoted as the real president of Venezuela, and actually promoting, some kind of a military coup to oust Maduro in favor of Guaido. You know what Maduro said? I was sitting right next to him. I'll never forget that. You want to have another Vietnam? Okay, come here and try to get it from Venezuela. That's the spirit there. That's the revolutionary spirit of Venezuela. And I just think, I just want to say one thing based on that, if you don't mind, and we have to close. I would say the international observers from Canada or elsewhere, everyone who was there, they must not give in 1 centimeter to the basic notion that the only deciding factor, the only sovereign factor to decide the outcome of the elections is the CNE, the Council of National Electoral Council. It's the only one who decide. Certainly not Miami, certainly not anywhere else. No international observer, in my view, can hesitate 1 second by upholding that basic principle, that is the Venezuelan people, through their constitution and through their electoral council, is the one that makes the decision about the outcome of the election. No one else.
Two quick last questions, which is, what can you enlighten our audience about Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia? Sorry if I'm butchering that. Who the U.S. and its allies recognize as the winner of the elections. Briefly, what can you tell us about him?
Well, I don't know too much about it because I don't spend too much time on these type of characters, but I did notice there was very documented evidence. He actually was a CIA asset. I saw an ID with himself, his photograph, a CIA asset working. I forget which country, but he was operating in other countries in Latin America in support of, as an operative of the CIA. So, I don't know anything else about him aside when you look at him. He looks very old. He's sort of the just wandering around. He's sort of the Venezuelan
All
Venezuela the Venezuelan version of Joe Biden, walking around and all that. He doesn't know what's happening, So, and he's a former CIA agent. In any case, the most important thing, he's aligned with China. And we know that they are for the violent overthrow, they are for the overthrow of the Maduro government by any means necessary. That is the most important thing people should take away with regards to that individual.
And final question I wanted to ask you is now there's now I wanted to cover this issue, but I wasn't able to get a member of a communist a member of a communist party on to try to debate this. Now, apparently, there's been a very bitter falling out between the Communist Party of Venezuela, which has often always even if they may have disagreements with the ruling Socialist Party, they've often defended the ruling Socialist Party under Chavez, later under Maduro, against smears, lies, and whatnot. But now apparently the Communist Party of Venezuela has had a very bitter falling out with Maduro. The government later intervened in the Communist Party of Venezuela and kicked out members of the party, and that has had members of communist parties globally condemn Maduro for interfering in the internal politics of Venezuela. But now I'm hearing from other people that actually there is a lot of divisions within the Communist Party of Venezuela over over whether to continue to support Maduro or actually supporting the opposition, which is mostly Western bootlickers and far right folks. So I was wondering, can you enlighten us on that? And is there any chance, because you've long been associated with Cuba's solidarity, is there any chance that the government of Cuba can be a good moderator to try to bring peace between the Communist Party of Venezuela and the ruling Socialist Party led by Maduro?
I'm glad that you asked that question here. I'm not an expert, but I'm quite familiar with the situation with regards to the Communist Party of Venezuela. First thing one has to take into account, the Communist Party of Venezuela has a long revolutionary tradition, going back many years since the beginning, like the 1920s or 30s. And many of the current leadership of the Chavista or Maduro circles come from that tradition, from the Communist Party of Venezuela tradition. So, and at the crucial time when Chavez formed the new Popular Front to get elected, and first time and the second time, the Communist Party of Venezuela fully supported it. But at one point, the leadership of the Communist Party, just capitulating under the pressure of the Western outlook against dictatorship, against Chavez, and later against Maduro, changed the position of the party in opposition to Maduro. Like, this is what they actually said, believe it or not. They said that the right-wing opposition and Maduro are both two sides of the same coin, of the same coin. They are both are bourgeois. So, I've been around for a long time. When a communist starts to speak like that, Maduro and right-wing opposition are both bourgeois. We know what it's all about. They're not against the right-wing bourgeois. The really most important target is the Maduro government. Okay, so they took this stand. But the people within, last time I was in Caracas, 3-4 years ago, I actually spoke to members of the PSUV, the Socialist Party in Venezuela, and they told me they were involved in the struggle to restructure the Communist Party of Venezuela, to bring it back into the fold of having a revolutionary position in support of the Maduro government. And that is what happened. They actually took it over legally, and the Venezuelan government just the judicial system just sort of agreed with that overall change, overall takeover, which is completely legal. So some people say there are not two-party communist parties in Venezuela. There's only one. The original one that was founded in the 1920s, that was taken over or retaken again, salvaged from that terrible situation whereby they would say both sides are wrong, Maduro and the right-wing bourgeoisie, salvage that tradition for which many people, Venezuelans, gave their life for as members of the party, to once again join that camp in support of Chavismo. So there's only one Communist Party, the one who supports that. The others are a so-called Communist Party. They just call themselves the Communist Party. And if you go online, when you mention Communist Party of Venezuela, the only thing that comes up is the one that the faction that were overthrown, that they are against Maduro, and they join in the basic U.S. narrative that Maduro is a dictator who has to be overthrown and all that. They got all the attention to social media. Well, the Communist Party of Venezuela, look, I was in Caracas several days, right? The Communist Party of Venezuela, the only one that supports Maduro, they're very, very, you see them all over the place. They're very vocal. Like in one meeting that I attended was a closed meeting based on a radio program that's broadcast in Venezuela. You had many people from different sections. One important contingent there was the Communist Party of Venezuela with their flag there. And the flag, the symbol on their flag is a rooster. So they actually have one of the supporters during the course of that meeting giving a rooster call. Sorry, I can't imitate it. Giving a rooster call, you would swear there was a real rooster. That was in one meeting. And
Funny
then
because,
later on,
it's funny because in Belgium, I'm based in Wallonia, and the flag of Wallonia is a red rooster. So
yeah, so we heard those rooster cries in the meeting, and then that same closing candidate, same closing election campaign that I mentioned before, where you had to be 500,000 people. One of those, I have photographs like I showed you. One of the most important, the important presence there was members of the Communist Party of Venezuela with their flags in support of Maduro. So there's only one Communist Party of Venezuela, the one that supports Maduro. The clique that were overthrown, they're worse than U.S. imperialism because they present themselves as being left, as being communist. Communists who oppose. How can a communist oppose Maduro? With regards to the other communist parties in the world, yeah, it's very sad. You mentioned Havana. I was very unhappy at one point. The Cuban government had a meeting of communist parties from across the world, and one of the communist parties who was invited was the old Communist Party that was overthrown, and they actually in Havana in the convention center, known for its anti-imperialist revolution, anti-imperialist stands, and in support of Czech. They actually went there publicly and denounced Maduro in Havana. Of course, another Communist Party went there and to denounce Iran, the government, as being a dictatorship, religious zealots and all that. So yeah, there's a problem. And I have friends in the Communist Party of Canada, and they, officially the Communist Party of Canada supports that party, the one that opposes Maduro. So, I have friendly discussions. How the hell can you, live with that? But I think that deep down, they actually did not support that Communist Party in Venezuela because I saw that some of them have actually, in my posts on Facebook and Twitter, they actually not only liked it, but they reposted my latest position, one that you read on Orinoco Tribune. They reposted that, fully in support of Maduro, right? I don't take a half-inch stand between Maduro and the right wing. So the members of the party must be unhappy or distraught or whatever, or thinking things through. And they have their own feelings, which is not coincide with the so-called international communist movement, which is really terrible when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to many things. Even with regards to Palestine, instead of openly supporting resistance, they sort of take a halfway measure. So I think it's an important point that you raised with regard to this Communist Party. And, I just based on my own experience. There's only one Communist Party in Venezuela. I saw them, flesh and blood, the ones who support Maduro. And I really like to salute those comrades in the Communist Party of Venezuela who had the guts to take on that old guard, which is very well known, reverend and all that, but they had the guts to take it over and direct the Communist Party of Venezuela, with its long tradition, back onto the road of supporting the revolutionary process in Venezuela.
Well, thank you very much for that. And in case in case somebody watching this who is from who is a member of a communist party from wherever in the world, it could be Greece, it could be Australia, it could be Britain, it could be uh, Argentina, Spain, even if you disagree with what Arnold says, or even what Orinoco Tribune has published about the supposed conflict that's going on between the Venezuelan Communist Party and the ruling Socialist Party. We would be happy to have that debate as long as it's civil and nobody calls one another a tanky and so forth.
Okay. In
But
fact, if there's any challenge, I'll be happy to have a debate, a friendly debate with someone who supports that position of the communist, so-called the former Communist Party of Venezuela, which is not the one that
don't call us
really
tank.
is managed.
Exactly. Don't call us tankies, and we won't call you bootlickers. I think that'll be the way.
That's a good balancing act. Yeah, that's right. Pretty fair.
Well, it's so then I think that's a perfect place to end. Well, we were joined on this edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. We were joined by our returning champion, Arnold August, who is a Canadian journalist and a lecturer, leading expert on Cuba, a strong Cuba solidarity activist, and again, he is the author. And folks, do get the following books: Democracy in Cuba and the 1997-98 elections, Cuba and its neighbors, Democracy in Motion, Cuba and U.S. relations, Obama and beyond. And you can find on his website, you can find all of his various publications, Arnold's various articles at the Canada Files, Orinoco Tribune, CGTN TV, Black Agenda Reports, Globalresearch.ca, and also a bunch of his appearances at Press TV, RT, Sputnik, Telesur, as well as Arnold's appearances at the International Manifesto Group, which he's also an editorial member. And Arnold is going to be joining us again later this month. We won't say when, but he is going to be coming back later this month, where we're going to be talking more about Palestine and Iran. And Arnold, you also have another book on Cuba coming out. Please plug it for us.
Yeah. Before I plug that book, if you don't mind, I'd like to spell out the my website. So it's a completely renovated, modern website. www.arnoldaugust.com, like my name. There's nothing in between. arnoldaugust.com. Brand new website. I had 4 people working on it almost day and night over the last few months, and it's completely renovated. It's modern, much more modern than I am, much more younger than I am. But check it out, please. And with regards to my last book, my most recent book, Fidel Castro, that is published in Spanish. And the title is Fidel Castro, Visión de Canadiense, Fidel Castro, the vision of a Canadian. In fact, it was published by the Centro Fidel Castro in Havana, and there's going to be a book launch of the Spanish version in Ottawa. The Cuban embassy in Ottawa invited me to present that book on August 13th in the embassy to celebrate the anniversary of the birth of Fidel Castro. So I'm happy to take part to participate in that very soon in Ottawa, and hopefully very soon the English version of that book, adapted to a English language audience, would be published hopefully in 2025. So that's the latest step.
Fantastic, and we'll also you're already going to be coming back on the show later this month, but we also have to have you back on the program to talk about Fidel Castro, and which I'm looking forward to talking about, because what I would love to do with that conversation on on Fidel is go through all of the major gains he made while leader of Cuba, from the 1960s all the way up until the 2000s when he passed away. We will talk about some of the mistakes he made, but we will be emphasizing a lot on how such an extraordinary man managed to eliminate illiteracy, managed to make the life expectancy of his people triple, all of that while under economic terrorism. Oh, I'm sorry, sanctions. So,
Right. No, exactly.
so
Quite
Arnold,
an accomplishment.
until then, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Looking forward to having you coming back on later this month, and best of luck with everything. All right.
Thank you very much for having me once again. It's always a pleasure exchanging with you. You have
Likewise.
a great show. People should support your show as well as your latest fund drive to support your work.
Yes, and of course, folks, you can donate now on PayPal, and please do. And until then, power to the people and death to settler colonialism, Zionism, and Western imperialism.
Right.